Shalom, shalom, Akim. This is your brother Azariah. I want to start by giving all the praise, all the honor, and the glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahawashi, a peace and blessings to the hopeful elect that are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth that are learning and or teaching this gospel in truth and sincerity. All right, what we're going to do right here is, we're going to get right to it. It's the beginning of a series. You know, it might be called LSD, Lunar Sabbath Destruction, or Lunar Sabbath Decapitated, or Lunar Sabbath Decimated. However, which one sounds best to you, put in, that'll be the title of the playlist. That's how we're gonna look at it as. And the reason why I'm making light of this in terms of, the humor is because this is a false doctrine. So I guess I really shouldn't. Lesson wise, we're going to get into this to disprove all the, a lot of the talking that's been going on about the lunar Sabbath being correct, the lunar Sabbath, and really just installing a lot of confusion. This is a recycled doctrine. This is a recycled doctrine and has been around for a little bit. So it's just coming back around and making it surface. But I will say there's certain brothers that are, who they are, that push it harder. And some of you might not know, but there's brothers, I'm saying, I'm not just talking just Genesis. They're the primary brothers that are pushing it, but there's a lot of other people that are pushing this to be the correct Sabbath, and then going as far as to say that if you're keeping the Friday sundown, Saturday sundown Sabbath, you're a devil worshiper, right? So, it's a lot of madness, and to install confusion and to teach people the wrong way. And what we're here to do is be, ministers of truth, right? Disciples of Yahawashi, who is the truth. And we want to install the correct way. Not even install, it's been installed, but to clear and bring a defense to the truth of Yahawashi HaMashiach, edifying the people about this false doctrine and cutting it to pieces, man. If the Most High say the same, if he willeth it, So that's what we're gonna do. And I hope that this lesson is edifying. So it's gonna be, if the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Yahawashi, through his son Yahawashi, say the same, right? If he says the same, there's gonna be, you can expect a good row of lessons. There was a debate that just happened, dealing with Genesis and believers of the way. I'm actually on the clip, right? I may even put the clip in here. I don't know. We'll see. Wherever it goes, because I just want this to be edifying at the end of the day. This ain't to bring nobody down. This is to destroy false doctrine. And for even you Lunar Sabbath believers that may be on the fence and you're starting to think, well, maybe, hey, look, from whatever you've seen, whether it's from the debate, from, BOW showing signs of the cracks that are in this false doctrine, and other brothers that are doing it as well, that have shown something that you've come across, whatever the case, old to new lessons, whichever it be, right? Hoping this is edifying for y'all too, so y'all can get on the right Sabbath, right? These lessons are for the hopeful elect. We're directing them to the hopeful elect, the chosen, those who are believers in Yahawashi, who will endure to the end, praying that we're also amongst that, right? So it's for y'all, but it's also for the nation as well, because we don't know who may become a believer in Yahawashi HaMashiach. We don't know. We don't know who's an elect that's sitting on the outskirts right now. And you got this wicked Sabbath, this false, moniker Sabbath right here that is, bringing confusion to having people think that, some people that are on the correct Sabbath to go be on this false Sabbath, right? That isn't backed up by the scriptures. There's insertations and everything to make it work for people who believe this, right? Who are seared in like a hot iron, right? Seared in their consciousness. All right. So let's get into the first point. I'm just going to get into is real simple right here. The first point is real simple because even I saw brothers from in the debate, the BOW, the brothers was asked a question concerning, is the Sabbath a feast day, right? Is the Sabbath considered a feast day? Like the rest, like Passover, like feast of Pentecost or first fruits, or that's AKA first fruits, or trumpets, Tabernacles, Day of stuff like that, which we know Day of Atonement is not a feast in itself. It's just listed amongst the feast days because it's a high holy day, right? We know that's a high holy day. They were asked that, and again, another question, another topic, I may get into is dealing with debates, and how, this stuff, how to discern in debates and what could be edifying and what's not. You got to just be able to use discernment on them. So I may do a lesson on that. The Most High, says the same. Bashim Mashiach Yahawashi. But for now, let's get into this Leviticus chapter 23. Right? We're going to see because this is the whole argument, right? Is a Sabbath day determined by the moon? All right, let's get this right here. Leviticus 23. Now, first off, we'll start at the top 3, right? Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of Yahweh, which he proclaimed to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings. All right. So how this was read, this really was an insertion or a misread by the brother from Genesis Aside. He went into this, and what he tried to do was use the point. And mind you, like I said, this is not to attack or destroy nobody personally. This ain't personal. It's just about Abba's business, man. And when you teach false doctrine, we got to get to work. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. The false doctrine is going to get this work, and really it correlates to you too because you teaching it in that regard. So just tied to what you're teaching. You know what I'm saying? I don't hate nobody. Can't hate anybody, right? Because that's not what we're commanded to do, is to love our brother. And this correction for any brother too. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully if their hearts are open, right? They aren't hardened, they can take heed to this. And if you're moving in sincerity, you'll see the truth of this. Or even at least to consider, right? So again, in verse 3, it was used to be said that because, and I wasn't going far to say I can understand why you may take it like that. If you see Leviticus 23, when Yahweh was telling Moses, Speak unto the children of Israel and say concerning the feast of Yahweh, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. There's a period there. Now I know we don't use grammar, right? We don't use grammar in the Hebrew. Grammar doesn't apply to the Hebrew, but we are using a language that helps when the stuff has been translated. This does still play a factor in today's scripts that we're reading from, being that it is in English, right? There is grammar in this wicked English. So if we're going to read it in English, right, unless we're going to read a whole Hebrew Bible to, many of us that are not, fluid in Hebrew, can't read the whole Bible in Hebrew, all book, chapter, verse, the whole Bible, right? And I admit I'm not one of those who can. So unless we're going to do that, then by all means, we need to use what's there and apply it, right? Not to say we're not going to get into the Hebrew words, but just to say that, right, we're going to use all the tools that we can, that the Most High has given us, right, that apply and make sense. But these grammars, punctuation, all of that does apply. You know what I'm saying? You got to use the grammar. So no matter what, whether it be a period, a semicolon, right, whatever the case may be, these things do apply in the text we're reading because we're reading it in the language that we're reading it in, right? So there's a stopping point right here in after feast in verse 2. I understand why you didn't read verse 3 and you're thinking, oh, well, the first one that he named was the Sabbath, right? The first one is the Sabbath. So the Sabbath is considered a feast day. But we know, right, when you look through the Bible, again, the Sabbath day is a weekly cycle. It's always been 7 days, right? 7 days. As a matter of fact, that's what it says. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest. In holy convocation ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings. That's six consecutive days, and the 7th day would be our day of rest, brothers and sisters. All right. Now let's get into a scripture let's get into the moon, because we do know the moon, right? The moon plays a role in these feast days, and we're going to get into the moon in a second. Check this out. Check in verse 4, Leviticus 23. If you just read down, right? These are the feast of Yahweh, even holy convocations. So wait a minute. If we see that it talked about the Sabbath, letting you know there is a 7th day, a Sabbath, but verse 4 it says, these are the feast of Yahweh, even holy convocations which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. You see? Verse 5. In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover. All right. So we're looking at that first month. Okay. The first month, it would be on the 14th day of the first month. Now let's go over real quick to the book of Exodus chapter 12, right? So Exodus chapter 12 and verse 1. And Yahweh spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of year to you. First month of the year to you. Salaki. All right. So this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. What is that? The new moon. Right? The new moon would be the beginning of months. Okay. Now, I found it interesting, right? Something that, the Lord let me kind of just generate a question in my mind for lunar Sabbath keepers, right? Something I just like looking at and thinking about is, this would be the opportunity right now to establish the fact that the new moon is a day that you could work, right? You shouldn't work, that you shouldn't work, and you can't buy or sell, because in Leviticus 23, right? What I'm trying to get at, if you go back to Leviticus chapter 23, it tells you about the Sabbath, and then it goes right into the feast days, right? And it tells you in the Sabbath there should be no work, right? There shall be no work on the Sabbath day. There shall be no work on these holy convocations. But yet, somehow, the new moon isn't listed as a day that you should do no work. Even though they talk about appointed time and seasons, the new moon is not listed up here. I wonder why. If the new moon was a Sabbath, or if the new moon was a day that you're not supposed to work, well, why isn't it in Leviticus 23 with the rest of the feast days? Oh man, it's just something to think about. So let's read that actually. Right? Let's go to verse 7. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. Alright? But ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh 7 days. And the 7th day is an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. And the same goes with the rest of the feast days. The Feast of Tabernacles, right, is the only other one. The Passover / Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? Which the unleavened bread is just a continuation of the Passover. So they both go one and the same. Because you're going to have the Passover night, but it's going to continue on in the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Even simultaneously, the Passover and the unleavened bread are the same day. Having unleavened bread on the Passover night. All right. That's why there's a Sabbath the first day and the last day. Count the 7 days. Feast of Tabernacle, the same thing. All the other days are one shot days, meaning it's just one day that you do them, and you don't you don't do any servile work on those days because they're high holy days. Sabbath day, we know, is a day you don't do any work, right? Other things, no kindling of fire. Now, when we get into speaking of these Sabbath days, right? So let's go to verse 3. Right?
Strong's H 7676. Shabbath.
All right, so we have a Shabbath, right? That's a Shabbath. That's a 7-day Sabbath. Okay? That's a Shabbath. Now, when you go into let's jump down to verse 39, right? Now this is dealing with you're still dealing with the feast, right? Let's go into verse 39. Also on the 15th day of the 7th month, when you have gathered in the fruit of the land, you shall have a feast. You shall keep a feast unto Yahweh 7 days. On the first day shall be a Shabbat, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath, right? So that's a Sabbath and a Sabbath, Salakia. First day shall be a Sabbath, on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. We know that's dealing with Feast of Tabernacles. All right, so let's go into the Sabbath within those days.
Strong's H 7677. Shabbathon.
So that's a Shabbath one in the Hebrew, right? That's a Shabbath one, right? It's a Sabbath, but it's a Sabbath dealing with the high holy days. And even in the outline biblical usage is giving you some of them, right? Day of Atonement, Sabbath, right? They could put the Passover day in there too, but you get it. The first and last days of Feast of Tabernacles. This is a Shabbath one. That's what these high holy days would be. Shabbath ones. The regular Sabbath is a Shabbath. All right. So that's the difference between the two. You know, one of the debates, that debate, you know, like I said, I might even do a analysis on that one. We'll see. Because I think they you know, so I'd asked them that question. They just kind of got caught in the moment. And that's what happens in these debates. But, you know, I rest my case on that for the time being. So we have a Shabbath one and a Shabbath. And that's your difference right there. So we see right there exactly that the Sabbath, right? We see the Sabbath isn't governed by the moon already. Let's get Sirach chapter 43 and verse 6. He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. Look at that. That's season. That's a season right there, to serve in her season. We keep the high holy days on appointed seasons, right? This is due to the months. All right. Let's get the book of Psalms, chapter 104. And verse 19. He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. Right? The moon was set for specific seasons. Alright? Now we look here. You go into appointed, the word is asal. To work, to deal with, to appoint, to ordain, to institute. You know, all based on the context, right? This is to institute, right? And that's what's been happening. Seasons were appointed by the Most High. He instituted these high holy days. Right? Let's look at the word for seasons.
Strong's H 4150. Moed.
So we got moed, the Hebrew word, or moad, the Hebrew word for seasons. So, appointed place, appointed time, needed. meeting, sacred season, set feast, appointed season. That's what the moon does. That's what the moon does. The moon is for the appointed times and seasons of these high holy days. But it does not dictate and govern the Sabbath. Alright, check this out. Let's go to the etymology for the word moon. Salaki for this noise in the background. Let's go to the etymology for this word moon. Heavenly body, which revolves around the earth monthly, right? This is the etymology for moon. Revolves around the earth monthly. You don't see weekly, you don't see by day. This is by a month, right? Everything points to the moon being from the month. To measure in reference to the moon's phases, an ancient universal measure of time. See that? Dealing with a month. That's what the moon does, dealing with the cycles. Moon phases, as far as biblically in terms of keeping high holy days, that's what the moon does in appointed time and seasons. We do not use it for a day or a week, which the Sabbath is, on a weekly cycle. Alright? So I hope, matter of fact, Sabbath even pertains to a week. It's 7 days. And I also, before I close out, I forgot to mention that, see, that's why on a Shabbat and a Shabbat one, right? A Shabbat one, the high holy days are going to supersede the Shabbat days. Right, they're gonna oversee them because you can cook, right? On those days that you would have a feast, you gotta cook. So that's why there's a difference in the type of Sabbath that it is. All right, let's get this precept real quick. It's the book of Judah, chapter 10 and verse 1. Now after that she had ceased to cry unto the God of Israel, and had made an end of all these words. She rose where she had fallen down, and called her maid, and went down into the house in the which she abode in the Sabbath days and in her feast days. Alright, so you see there's a difference. Sabbath days and feast days, this is where she went. She fallen down, she called her maid and went into the house she usually abides in the Sabbath and the feast days. Why is it separate? Because there's a Shabbat and there's a Shabbat one. Shabbat being the weekly Sabbath, Shabbat one being the high holy days, which are likened onto a Sabbath. They are as a Sabbath, but the rules of the high holy days supersede a Sabbath day, in the sense of, so if it's a feast day, you can cook and do work pertaining to the feast, right? Day of Atonement, you would fast all day, 24 hours. You see that? No servile work. So, I hope this was edifying. The brothers and sisters, y'all willing, we're going to continue to do more, we're going to help them to do more, picking apart of this lunar Sabbath doctrine, and hope that brothers and sisters can break free of the strongholds from the truth of Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahawashi. So I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahawashi. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect that are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, that are learning and or teaching this gospel, truth and sincerity. Until next time, Yahweh willing, Shalom.